Because of several months of war between the United States and Iran, and the deaths of several high-ranking Iranian officials, including Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, it's not surprising that Iran wants to retaliate against the leader of their biggest enemy, U.S. President Donald Trump. But despite the threats and alleged assassination plots against him, it seems that the U.S. Secret Service is always one step ahead when it comes to protecting the President of the United States. One of the clearest examples of this happened in Turkey, where U.S. intelligence reportedly discovered a plan to bring down Donald Trump's Air Force One. Instead of canceling the trip, the Secret Service and U.S. military used a unique deception strategy to mislead anyone waiting for him. How did they detect Iran's plan? What kind of deception did they use? And what modern tactics are now being used by the Secret Service, CIA, and FBI against the growing threat to Donald Trump's life from Iran? And most importantly, what will the U.S. do to Iran if they succeed in assassinating Donald Trump? Mr. Good Vibes Shorts. July 8, 2026. The NATO summit has just ended in Ankara, Turkey, and U.S. President Donald Trump is preparing to leave the country. On a normal day, the process would have been simple: a motorcade to the airport, board Air Force One, then fly back home. But a few hours before his departure, an intelligence report arrived that immediately raised alarms with the Secret Service, CIA, and U.S. military. There could be Iranian operatives in Turkey, waiting for the right opportunity to assassinate the president. This wasn't an ordinary threat that just came from an anonymous message. According to reports, separate intelligence was gathered from the National Security Agency, CIA, and Turkish intelligence. There were intercepted electronic communications indicating an active Iranian operation in Turkey. When this was cross-checked with various intelligence sources, a more frightening possibility emerged. The target could be the presidential aircraft as it leaves the Ankara airport. And we're not just talking about guns or bombs. What security officials fear is a surface-to-air missile, possibly a shoulder-fired weapon that can hit an aircraft while it's taking off or landing, when it is flying lower and its movements are more predictable. The problem became even more serious because there are reports that Iranian operatives may know the hotel where Trump is staying and some of his movements in Ankara. This means that if the intelligence is true, they are not just guessing. They may actually be monitoring the president. But there is one big problem. There is still no clear evidence of the exact location of the alleged missile team. There are even some CIA officials who doubt whether Iran can really carry out such an operation in Turkey, especially in the middle of a NATO summit that is full of security forces and intelligence agencies. So the officials were faced with a very difficult question. What if the intelligence is wrong? But the opposite is even more frightening. What if it's right? In this kind of situation, the Secret Service can't wait for a missile to actually be launched before they believe it. There's another reason why they don't want to take that risk. The aircraft that Trump used to go to Turkey was a new Boeing 747 that was previously given by Qatar and was quickly prepared for presidential use. But according to reports, it still doesn't have all the sophisticated missile warning and defensive countermeasures that the older Air Force One has. This means that if there really was a missile waiting outside Ankara, the plane could be more vulnerable than the standard Air Force One. This is where Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane, the Secret Service, the White House Military Office, and other senior officials came in. They only had a few hours to find a solution. They didn't want to cancel the flight because it might make America look afraid. They also couldn't just keep the departure a secret because hundreds of eyes were watching Donald Trump. So they came up with a different plan. They would show the whole world which plane Donald Trump would be taking, and afterwards they would secretly take the president out of there. Air Force One itself would be their bait. This is where one of the most unusual presidential escape operations reported in modern times began. On the outside, everything had to look normal. No sign of panic, no cancellation of schedules, and no indication that the White House had received an assassination warning. So President Trump's regular departure routine continued. The presidential motorcade arrived at the airport. Cameras, journalists, and staff were all there. Trump came out, climbed the stairs of the large Air Force One, and even waved before going inside. If there were any Iranian operatives watching television, social media, airport activity, or any surveillance source, the message was clear. The target was already on the plane. But that's exactly what the Secret Service wanted them to believe. As soon as Trump entered, the window shades on the aircraft were immediately closed. Behind the scenes, an airport catering truck was waiting, the ordinary vehicle that usually delivers food and supplies to the airplane. But this time, it wasn't carrying food. It was carrying its most important cargo. Trump secretly transferred to the catering truck, along with a small group of his closest aides and Secret Service agents. There was no motorcade and no presidential limousine. Only an ordinary catering truck moved on the tarmac. And that was exactly the beauty of the plan, while all eyes were focused on the massive Air Force One. The truck quickly brought Trump to another part of the airport. According to CNN, the trip took only about 162 seconds before they reached the real aircraft that the president would use, a smaller C-32A, the military version of the Boeing 757. It's harder to notice, and most importantly, that's not the plane anyone who might be waiting would expect. Meanwhile, many staff, security personnel, and journalists remained on the large presidential jet. Some senior officials knew what was happening, but many of those on board didn't realize right away. The president was already gone. And to make the deception even more believable, Air Force One wasn't just left on the ground. It also took off. That means in the sky, there were two American aircrafts leaving Turkey at the same time. One large airplane that most people thought was carrying the president, and a smaller aircraft where Donald Trump was actually on board. Both of them were even given a fighter escort. So if someone was only tracking the large Air Force One, there was almost no reason to be suspicious. From the outside, everything looked normal. But within the operation, it was a classic shell game. You show the enemy the target, then you switch it without them noticing. And if it's true that there's an Iranian team waiting to hit Air Force One, it's possible that the plane they're monitoring no longer has Donald Trump on board. While the big jet is drawing all the attention, the real president is getting farther and farther away from danger. When the two American aircraft finally exited Turkish airspace, only then did Donald Trump's security team breathe a little easier. No missile was launched, no explosion, no blast, no emergency interception in the air, and the president arrived safely in the UK aboard the smaller plane. But here, the whole operation becomes even more mysterious. After Trump left, American and Turkish authorities continued searching for the alleged Iranian team that might have been waiting near his flight route. They examined intelligence, surveillance data, and possible locations where a missile team could hide. But they didn't catch anyone. There was also no concrete evidence that there was actually a missile launcher positioned and ready to fire at the presidential aircraft that night. So it's only natural to ask, was it all just a false alarm? It's possible, but for the Secret Service, CIA, and U.S. military, making a decision isn't that simple. The intelligence they received was considered serious and credible enough to change the entire presidential departure plan in just a few hours. When the President of the United States is the possible target, the security team can't wait until they actually see someone holding a missile launcher. Because if the intelligence is correct and they make the wrong decision, there won't be a second chance. And for example, if Iran actually succeeds in assassinating Trump, it's likely that the biggest American offensive will erupt, using their most powerful forces against Iran. And that's the scenario that world leaders are most afraid of happening. And there's a big reason why they didn't just ignore Iran's desire to kill Trump. January 2020. Trump ordered an American drone strike near Baghdad International Airport that killed General Qasem Soleimani, a respected and well-known commander of the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. For many Iranian officials, Soleimani was not just an ordinary general. He was one of the most important military figures in Iran. He had a major influence on Iranian operations in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and other parts of the Middle East. For Iran, his killing was not just a military loss. It was also a huge insult and humiliation. And since then, Iran has repeatedly promised revenge. In fact, in 2024, the U.S. government caught Farhad Shakari, an Iranian asset, who was allegedly ordered by the IRGC to make a plan to kill Trump while he was running again for president. And Trump wasn't the only target in 2022. Shahram Khosravi, allegedly a member of the IRGC, was also charged in America for planning to have Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, killed. The offer for the assassination reportedly reached $300,000, and the suspected reason behind it was revenge for Soleimani's death. Even former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and other senior officials from the first Trump administration were under protection for a long time due to Iranian threats. So when the warning came in Turkey during the NATO summit in 2026, it was not considered a random threat because of Iran's history and motive against Trump. And most importantly, there have been previous cases showing that Iran is capable of using operatives, middlemen, and murder-for-hire networks outside its own country to carry out their revenge. And by 2026, Iran had even more reason to seek revenge after major U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran and the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with other senior Iranian officials. The list of reasons why Iran might personally consider Trump as a primary target has grown even longer. So even if no missile team was caught in Ankara, one thing is clear to the U.S. Secret Service. They don't need to see the weapon before moving the target away. But while the Secret Service is busy protecting Donald Trump, there's another event that's making the situation even worse. It's not just the president that Iran plans to target. His wife and children have also started to appear in assassination threats. In July 2026, the Tasnim news agency, an Iranian media organization known to be close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, released a disturbing video directly targeting First Lady Melania Trump. The video used AI-generated images, publicly available footage, and information about places frequently visited by Melania. She was shown traveling and shopping in New York, while the video discussed how an attacker could potentially exploit her regular activities. There were also possible methods mentioned. Among the possible attacks mentioned was poisoning. But more important than the actual details of the video for American authorities was its clear message. It aimed to encourage others to harm the First Lady. And before the video ended, another name came up: Barron Trump, the son of Donald Trump. It directly gave a warning to the only child of Melania and Donald Trump, as if saying that the revenge is not over yet, and he could be the next target. There was no fear either. That's where the propaganda ended. There were also billboards that appeared in the middle of Tehran, showing Trump, Melania, and some of his children in images that made it look like they were already dead. The message clearly revolves around the concept of revenge, blood for blood. There was also a separate threat regarding Trump's daughter, Ivanka, but it's important to make a clear distinction. The propaganda against Trump's family is not automatic proof that there is actually an assassination team being sent to kill them. The same goes for the allegations about Ivanka. But for the Secret Service, they can't just say it's only propaganda and forget about it. That's why protective intelligence, advanced security, and coordination with the FBI, military, and intelligence agencies have all been tightened. Counter-surveillance is also more important now, and they change movement patterns to make it harder to predict where the person they're protecting is and where they're going. And if necessary, they can use the same principles they applied in Turkey. Because of the recent assassination threats, Donald Trump and his family are no longer surrounded by ordinary presidential security. Secret Service Director Sean Curran himself said that they are in one of the toughest threat environments he has seen in his 24-year career. They are investigating more than 10,000 threat-related cases this year, almost a 40% increase compared to previous years. And when it comes to Trump, one of the biggest concerns now is not just snipers or people carrying guns, but also drones and possible aerial attacks. At the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, a photo was even taken of an Avenger short-range air defense system while the president was there playing golf. This is a Humvee-based military system that can detect and defend an area against several low-flying aerial threats. In other words, while Trump was playing golf, there was military-grade air defense capability watching over the area. This is a big change in the type of threat that the Secret Service has to face. But defense isn't just about hardware. What happened in Turkey also showed a powerful weapon: deception. If necessary, the aircraft, motorcade, schedule, and movements of the president can be changed without informing many people. The goal is simple: to deceive Iran about the real location of the target. This is exactly what was done in the Air Force One operation in Turkey. But there's another layer that is almost invisible to the public. While the Secret Service stays close to the president, the FBI looks for the people who might be behind the threat. The FBI has its own Iran Threats Mission Center that combines counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and cyber investigations against Iranian operations. This also includes the Joint Terrorism Task Forces spread throughout America, made up of federal, state, and local governments. Their job includes following leads, monitoring suspicious networks, checking intelligence, and stopping a plot before it gets close to the target. Strict screening of letters, gifts, and packages is also part of presidential protection. This became even more important after propaganda came out mentioning a poisoning attempt against Melania Trump. The Secret Service does not disclose the exact procedures, but the federal government has access to specialized chemical, biological, and hazardous material detection capabilities when needed. The same applies to counter-surveillance. Before the president or first family arrives at a location, teams are already looking for unusual surveillance activity and possible individuals studying their movements. And they also try to make movement patterns unpredictable to make it harder to create an attack plan. The Secret Service does not disclose how many agents there are, where the defenses are positioned, or the exact route that will be used. And that's exactly the point. Because after what happened in Turkey, the new rules of the game are clear. If someone wants to kill Donald Trump, it's not enough for them to know where he's going. First, they have to figure out which of the things they see is real. And as proven by the catering truck and the decoy Air Force One, sometimes the most effective defense isn't the thickest armor, but making the enemy believe their target is in the wrong place. If you like this video, share it with others and don't forget to subscribe. Also, watch the videos on the right so you can spend even more of your time.